check, 1, 2. Mic check. Yo, it's Harlem on the rise, yo, we love to get the money. This a podcast, you can catch us being funny. Yeah, from 7 to 9, we living the lives. So stop everything, necessary is vibe. Catch us on the Wednesday, the steady on the hump day. Listen in your car like the Beamer or the Hyundai. Facebook Live, we live on the rap. You can call a kicker with us if you show respect. Yo, a lot of topics, we always got it poppin'. You know we neighborhood, we always kicking dollars. Yeah, that's the CeeLo, we do it for the people. Tighter than the ego, we ordinary people. We be kicking in, cause you know we living in. Come to catch a vibe, it's a vibe, come and witness it. We down for each other, no matter the weather. It's the beat 139, cause Harlem sit together.
Yeah. Welcome to the Beat 139. I'm Doc.
I'm Don Vito. How y'all doing?
Welcome everyone, and I'm Callie.
Okay, we want to welcome our first guest for this evening. We're excited to have this guy right here. We want to welcome an adjunct professor at New York University Silver School of Social Work, Community Affairs liaison at the Doe Fund, founder of Educate, Don't Incarcerate, and numerous awards. Terrance Coffee, welcome to the show. What's up, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing good.
How you feeling tonight, brother?
I'm feeling good to be here at the D139, so
Okay.
I'm hanging out with y'all. So
That's
I'm
what I'm
really
talking
enjoying
about.
this.
It's good to have you here, man.
It's good to be here.
Good to have you. So let's talk a little bit. Tell everybody where you from, man. Where you from?
Well, originally I'm from a little town in Florida
Okay.
called Belgrade, but it's right outside of Miami, and that was a place where I really began my life and things I went through in life. So
Right.
it is represented from down south. So I'm from
Okay.
down.
So how long you been in New York?
Well, I've been here about 10 years now. Let's do some, we were speaking earlier, and a lot of times, we look at life through this lens of what we think is, and, I really have to say that a lot of that has to do with the hands of God really guiding me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saving my life through some things that I went through in life. So
Yeah.
that at that point, that's where I started this process.
I can relate to that. I definitely can relate to that. So let's start off with your early years in your life, taking you through each cycle of your life. Like, start with the poverty, where things like that, the substance abuse and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, really, to be perfectly honest with you, I come from what a lot of cats kind of relate to when we start thinking about our parents. And,
Right.
My biological parents, my daddy was the pimp, my mom was the prostitute, my mom was the one who got pimped out by my daddy. So I came up from that breed and that cloth. And through that, I learned what I had to learn about survival with that going on. And it was during that process that, I think we had that's when the DHS, what they call it now, or DCF, whatever that is, came in, and they took my siblings and I, and we were all placed in foster care. And that's where the cycle of understanding or believing who I was or what I was at that time began to be, ingrained in my life. And at that point, going through the various foster homes and coming up the way I did, I came up very poor. I came up, just like most cats who came, from that era, seeing things. I'm the cat who wore the Bobos and the Pro Kids when everybody else had on the Chuck Taylors and this and that. And there were days and times and years throughout my life that I share with people, particularly young men, that I had to learn to fight. Not that I wanted to fight. I understand the concept of the idea of being bullied. I know what it is to be chased home, and I also know what it is to kind of reach that breaking point where violence became the way that I not only learned to protect myself, but also it was also an entry place where I began to be accepted. And for me as a young child, coming up like that, any intention, whether it was negative or positive, for me, was conducive to survival. And that's where the cycle of my life really began, when it, even with the drug game and with the substance abuse and with the this and everything else, even the incarceration. Because everything that, particularly in what I teach today at New York University, when we start thinking about forensic justice, because in the scope of that, we began to look at the entire person. You know, it's one thing when we can look at a behavior of an individual or a community or whatever, and that's easy for society to blame that individual or community, but we never look at the structural issues that created that situation. You can criticize a young man from going, you know, in a store to steal food, and you know he get caught and we want to send him to juvie, and you can do all that. But I was also that young person, but nobody never once asked me about was I eating at home, or was it this, or was it that. What it was, I was penalized and criminalized based upon my behavior, but nobody at no point or juncture ever said what were the conditions that created this situation for him.
Right.
And with that, growing up, and I have to say this, I was fortunate, unlike some, you know, young men who probably came through all of that. I came up in foster care, and I was adopted by a very good family. I went from having a daddy who was a pimp, my mom who was a prostitute, to having a father who was a minister, and my mother was a first lady. So I was confused, to be perfectly honest with you. And you know, with that and growing up, there was parts of my life, even with my family, who was very loving, taught me those morals and values and all those things. But really deep down inside, I felt as if that I was this charity case. I felt as if I was this thing, because through the other foster care, throughout foster care prior to my adoption, one of the things that you learn very clearly is that you're a check.
Right.
You understand that your existence is only based upon your ability to provide economic income for a family. So you go through that. Your value is based in that. Who you are is based in that. And you know, you find yourself going through these internal changes and challenges as an individual, and that's what I found in myself. Even with the love and everything that my family tried to pour in me, which they did. You know, I'm one of those folk, like, you know, during my time in prison, I had an opportunity to read the Bible a whole lot, because they really didn't have any other books.
Right.
So in that, I learned about the seed being planted. And although it didn't catch on at that time, during those years, it was years later that seed took root. It started to grow in my life, where you know, I'm having an opportunity to sit here with you guys today to discuss this.
So let me ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
One, how old you was when you went to the foster home, and how many siblings you had, and was y'all separated?
I first went to foster care when I was 6 years old. I have 3 siblings. Our oldest sister, she died, and I have a younger sister now who lives in Florida.
No, was y'all separated?
Yes, we were all separated. We were all put in different foster homes, and it was years later that through intervention we found one another. But our relationship, you know, is our relationship.
Yeah, because y'all ain't grew up together.
Right. So that, you know,
So you was grown when you connect with them?
Yes, with both of my sisters. I found my first sister, I think I found after 20 years, and my younger sister, we reconnected after 39 years.
Damn.
Yeah, so it's been that type of relationship where I know her as an individual, and I love her based upon knowing that my blood runs in her and her blood runs in me. But you know, my mama taught me a long time ago that, you know, blood really don't make you family. It's love and all those things that comes with that. So I learned a long time ago that sometimes love is thicker than blood. And those experiences came from my biological family, not my sister, because she was where she was at and she got the same maltreatment probably that I got growing up, because it's always been a very difficult conversation for me to have about my biological family, because growing up, I happened to know them, and there were times that particularly after my biological mother died, that I thought that in visiting them and seeing them, that at that point in time that it will be the point where they would want me back as their long lost sibling, et cetera, et cetera. And it was through that experience that I learned that wasn't so, and it was through the love of my mom that she taught me that lesson about sometimes love is thicker than blood, and love is not work. People use it now, and I come from that place where when we say our words, our bond and all that. So my mama taught me a long time ago that love is an action word. It's not what people say, it's what you do that makes the difference. So I don't, I'm very mindful of what people say, and I watch very closely what they do, and that's what I live my life.
So when did you reach the breakage point where you decided, you wanted to further your education and go into the direction that you're going to today?
Well, actually, that happened after my last incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
I was arrested in Miami for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and at that time, I had already been in prison 6 times.
Right.
So by the time I went to what we call the first appearance, most of your audience, and they understand it. I was already faced with 20 years, just based upon the arrest, because at that point in time, it was like, society or the courts felt like, okay, after 6 bids, after a lengthy criminal history, evidently you ain't got the message, so we're gonna do your mama a favor, your family a favor, and society a favor, and this is what we're gonna start with. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't inclusive of the 10 years that would have been on top of that. Mm-hmm. And that was the day I can honestly say to you, Callie, my mama, as I said, I grew up in the church, and she used to always tell me these things about one day you're gonna find yourself in a situation you can't get out of. And I dodged the bullets a whole lot in my life, through the penitentiary, through the streets, through all those things that I found myself involved in. But it was on that day that, I'm a big hip hop fan, so Tupac had his song say, "Me against the world," and once you on the cross, and that's the first time I felt that I was on the cross. And it was in that moment that her words came back to my mind about, all those times I went to church, that you look to the hills from which cometh your help. And whether I believed her or not, at that point in time, my desperation and fear and all the pain of my whole life played out in that one moment. And I remember praying. And it was in that moment that I learned about a week later that the charges were dropped against me. And I always talk to the guys, and when I go to Rikers out of Holyfield and all these various prisons, and I share that moment, because also in that moment of prayer, it was when I really was asking God, help me somehow to get my life together for something beneficial. And I promised him that if that ever happened to me, that I would utilize my life committed to helping other people. Now, that was a foxhole prayer, because the deeper prayer I was really praying was that I knew, because of the life I lived, I was going back to the pen. That was on the table, because my record said so. So what I was really praying for, Callie, at the time was that I didn't just get that much time. That was it. What all the other stuff they were talking, I didn't want that much.
First.
Yeah, let's get that first, then we'll deal with it. So let me not take that off the table. That was, I can't do that.
Of course.
I can't do that. And it was 2 weeks later, like I said, that I learned that the charges were dropped. It was the first time that, again, you're gonna hear me probably say a lot of spiritual things, nothing religious. And my mom always said, mama may have, papa may have, but God bless the child, he got his own. And I always thought that meant cause, money, having, holding that. But really what she was talking about was like a relationship with God. I ain't turning nothing spiritual. So I don't try to make nothing spiritual. I can only tell you the facts of what happened for me in that space.
When did you get out?
I was released in 2008. And it was about a few months later a few weeks later, to be perfectly honest with you, that I heard about this program in New York called Ready, Willing, and Able. And
so was that one of the first steps you took once you got released?
Yes, that was definitely one of the first.
You was in Florida at the time.
Yes, because.
And so you heard about Ready, Willing, and Able in New York. That's when you came in.
Yes, and the fact that why I have to say that part, and it's very critical. Again, a hip hop. Park had this song called "Death Around the Corner." And when I got out, I didn't, when you initially get out, what happened, I beat the charge, you think you beat the charge, but then it all came back to me, and there was an incident that transpired that, I felt that cold hand. And unless you've been there, you don't really know it until you feel it. And it was that point that I realized that, either I was gonna do something with my life, or this thing was gonna and you know, pretty much like a lot of the men and that I've known and I grew up with, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, so you got your GED,
Yes.
and then you got the associate degree.
Yes.
You went to Bronx Community College, and then through the Dole Funds Ready, Willing, and Able program, right?
Yeah. When I earned my GED while in prison.
In prison.
And when I got out, and that's one of the interesting facts on a lot of the work that I talked about today, when we think about discriminatory practice and structural issues that impact the outcomes of people's lives, particularly in that era.
Mm-hmm.
Because see, prior to the 96 crime bill, Bill Clinton and super predators, one of the things that was always said was that, you know, growing up, you got to have a high school diploma, you got to know how to read and write, et cetera, et cetera. So when I got my GED and I was getting ready to get out again, I was under the impression that, you know, I'm going to be able to get a job. I ain't got to go to prison no more because I got a GED and I can go and et cetera, et cetera. And what happened in the process of that is that the game changed at that time, because I remember getting out and my family buying me the tie, and, you know, I'm going on the job interviews and all this stuff, and what they began to ask at that point in time. And remember, we didn't understand particularly what was going on in society. I was just another young black male getting out of prison, thinking I'm going to do my life right. And it wasn't no more about did I have a GED or a high school diploma. What the first question they began to ask me, were you ever incarcerated? And nobody prepared me for that, and I didn't understand the stigmas and the implicit biases that were tied to that. I didn't understand the political atmosphere. None of that was aware. So, and that became an ongoing trend for me. It was later that after I graduated the Doe Fund program, that it was also there that I found my purpose in life. And in that was to help other men. So when I initially enrolled in Bronx Community College, I only went there through a program called College Initiative that assists formerly incarcerated men and women, you know, getting a higher education. I only went because I wanted to be a case manager.
Mm-hmm.
That was my goal, because I figured that, you know, at this time, you know, late in the game, Life Jennings had that song, so even when your husband dead. So my days was gone. The game was over with for me. I mean, there ain't no thugging after thugging. So at that point, I assumed that I could spend the rest of my life helping other men. And it was when I took my college placement test that, again, you hear me talk about my old girl a lot. And I scored very, 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 very high. I'm going to try to keep it there without letting my own head blow up. But my mom used to always tell me I was smart. Always told me that. But being a foster child, being adopted, when she was telling me these things growing up, what I thought she was just doing was trying to tell me something good. It's like a joke I tell people. It's like you see a baby and you know the baby is an ugly baby, and you're like, damn, that's an ugly baby. But if you ask the mother says, oh my God, you're such a beautiful child. Yeah. So I thought my mama was just telling me those things because she knew my life was already what it was. Right. And it was through that that I began to embrace that part of me. And then, you know, from there at Bronx Community College, I excelled academically. I was inducted to Phi Theta Kappa. I won the Coca-Cola Scholarship Academic Award. I was honored with that. I traveled to Europe to study global poverty. And all that took place, and it was right after that, after graduation, that I received a scholarship from the CCTOP at New York University, where I earned my master's and my undergrad and my master's degree.
So what is your area of expertise, and why did you choose that?
Criminal justice reform policy.
Okay.
I earned my degree in social work, but my concentration is in policy, criminal justice reform and policy. And the reason I chose that was because it was, you know, as I went through my academic career, I began to understand the political implications, the social and the societal implications in regards to the criminal justice system and how it disproportionately impacted black communities, because I was one of those young men.
Because of your experience.
Exactly. Right. Because in looking back, I began to see, when we talk about probation reform, I began to see the impact of poverty on black and brown communities. I began to, you know, it's like I was walking through those experiences blind, But through my educational guides and individuals who were working, that's where, like they say, once I once was blind, but now I see. And that's where I began to see the ramifications and the discriminatory practices within our criminal justice system that caused me to say I was going to dedicate my life to this cause, and that's what led me.
Right, helping others who've been through
Exactly.
the same situation that you have.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That's a hell of a story right
Yeah.
Well,
It's deep.
but let me say, and one thing I want to make clear for myself, the young man over there, everyone in this room, particularly black communities, is that my life should not be an anomaly in this world and in this society, prior to or post incarceration. Because when we began to look at the school to prison pipeline, when we began to look at the lack of educational funding for poor black communities, when we began to look at after school programs that do not invest in poor black and brown communities, and when we began to look at the impact of the school to prison pipeline in the lives of young black men in poor black and brown communities, what we began to see is a reflection of what's happening in our adult criminal justice system. It's as if through this system, our young children are now being conditioned for the next step. And I've done some work with Michelle Alexander, and one of the things that we discussed when you go back to slavery, you will see that once the older men began to wean off, you will see the younger ones that would be taught by them to learn how to take up the mantle in those spaces. So it's very important to me, not only that the work that I do on the back end of criminal justice reform, but now I'm really focusing those efforts on the front end, because our children shouldn't have to wait to go to some type of juvenile justice center or be incarcerated for minor offenses that other people, children in other communities, don't never see a jail cell to have access to programs or education or et cetera. So you can go down the list, because I think that our purpose and my purpose is to really see and ensure that the same opportunities that are given to middle class and wealthy communities are also given to poor and black and brown communities, because our public school system funds each one of those spaces. Now, I don't know what happens to the funding when it goes to a certain district or you get to a certain zip code and all of a sudden there's no funding. But I go to various schools in these spaces, and I see the curriculum and I see the investment. So unless we begin to, through our political, social, and legislative branches, begin to take a critical and serious look at what's happening within the scope of the criminal justice system, then I think that we may just kind of be spinning our wheels with political rhetoric, and I'm not really for that.
Right. I'm actually glad you brought that up, because we also know, Professor, that you funded the nonprofit Educate, Don't Incarcerate in 2016.
Yes.
Can you fill us in on a little bit about that, on how you ran the program, and does the program still exist, and what age group did you take in and help?
Well, when I initially founded Educate, Don't Incarcerate, I was actually in my undergrad at New York University, and the idea and the basis of Educate, Don't Incarcerate is to provide educational assistance and opportunities to men who have been impacted by the criminal justice system. As of today, I have assisted over 25 men, well actually 50, with someone currently in school now.
And this is all ages, correct?
Yes, really from 18 and older.
Right, okay.
Working with the youth in that area has always been problematic because of, one of the things that we try to do is focus on that population that's coming out from incarceration. That's where I built up a lot of resources, a lot of insight, where I'm able to navigate that population through. And the whole idea of that group is once they graduate, it's almost like playing it forward, that they turn around and they mentor other men that are coming out. So also, in the last part I have to say is because Educate, Don't incarcerate focuses on the human potential and capital of poor Black and brown communities who have been locked away in cages. The potential to succeed, the potential to create policies, to create ideas, innovative ideas that help us navigate forward. Because one of my fundamental beliefs in this work is that those who are closest to the problem are those who are also closest to the solution. Unless legislative leaders, policy leaders, or whoever else choose not to have the voices of credible messengers on their committees, in their on their service branch, or whatever they want to call it, then I really think that when we talk about this conversation of progressive policies and inclusiveness, if we're not practicing that by bringing in the voices of those individuals, then we're doing a disservice to those populations as well as the communities that they're aiming to service.
Right, okay.
So, Terrance,
Yes.
you lived a hell of a life. Coming from Florida, your family, abandoned you. You grew up in a foster home. Some drugs happened in the process. You've been in prison 6 times. You was facing 20 years. I think you did 10, something like that. Whatever the case may be. But on the Big 139, we like to bring people with stories, and you have a hell of a story, man. You come a long way, man, and you changed, and you did this change as far as like growing up rough and then just getting up being a regular person. You are a hell of a person, and I just reading some stuff on you, and I want to share with our viewers that's very important and it's incredible to me. Like he says, Terrance has appeared in numerous venues such as Yahoo News with Katie Couric and News One. In Focus with Cheryl Willis, discussing relevant topics in relations to criminal justice reform in America. He has been published in USA Today regarding reentry and voting rights for formerly incarcerated. Through his efforts, he has also gained support of famed activist Michelle Alexander, author of the New York Times best-selling book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. He is currently in the process of producing a documentary called Cage Roses that focuses on the juvenile justice system in America. So, what is the documentary and what is it all about?
The documentary in and of itself focuses on the juvenile justice system and the trajectory and the impact of the juvenile justice system in the lives of young Black and brown youth. What we have learned is that through research and data, that a young man of color, young child of color, if they have any impact with the criminal justice system, law enforcement, they are 4 times more likely to be incarcerated than their white counterparts. What we learn when we start thinking about their life chances increased by dramatically, more likely to be shot, more likely to join a gang, more likely to drop out of school, more likely not to go to college, and more likely to go to prison. So it's very important to me, as I said earlier, when we talk about this conversation of criminal justice reform, and as I say to my students, I hear a lot of language around it, but because I'm from that breed and from that cloth, what I understand is almost like picking an apple off a tree. You're only picking fruits. That's going to grow back, and then you got all the other things. And until we, as a society, pull up the root, which when we're going to have to start talking about racism, when we're going to have to really talk about economic inequality, when we start thinking about, when they say to me, well, why the mother can't come to the PTA because it takes ... Well, you're not telling the fact that this mother is living in some project housing where she's trying to work 2 jobs, just stay above water. So what are you talking about? I mean, if we don't want to have those conversations, and again, it's easy to point the finger at certain issues and behaviors and say, see this, without looking at the environmental factors that's creating those situations. So in that, with the documentary, it really hones in and focuses on the impact of the juvenile justice system and its influence in really kind of walking our children into the adult criminal justice system. I have individuals such as Michelle Alexander is featured in it, along with representatives and professors from New York University, a lot of the individuals who work with the juvenile justice system. So it's important for me that as I said before, as we continue to have these conversations, we're going to have them in a more robust way and a more comprehensive way if we're really talking about creating change.
Mm-hmm. So, Professor, why the name Cage Roses? I find that very interesting, and I also wanted to know how would our audience and people who need to get into programs like this sign up for programs that you have available?
Well, the reason I chose Cage Roses, again, I will always say, you know, I'm a big hip hop fan, and Pac had a song called Rose, a poem called Roses That Grew from Concrete. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times on my sites, when I see young black men succeeding against all odds, I always say those are roses that grew from concrete. Mm-hmm. So when I used to at Rikers Island, when I go to the EMTS building, and I sometimes, when, you know, I look in the eyes of these young men who are in these cages. So these are beautiful young men. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I see them, they're locked in. So they have no, they can't grow.
Right.
They can't grow.
Right.
So these are our cage roses. These are beautiful black young men locked away in cages that have no space to grow because we can't water them with the love. We can't water them. And what's happening right now is they're being hardened by the concrete they live in. And then we want to criticize them for being hard in the concrete they live in. But if you go up from concrete, then you come up that way.
How can you blossom to be anything? Absolutely.
So, and that's where that was derived from, and how the audience can really get involved. We're actually in the final stage of editing, so we're going to be sending out a lot of once the final edit is set and the cut is set, that information will be released at that time through our website on Educate, Don't Incarcerate, which you can find us at educatedontincarcerate.com. I know we're not doing any promotions, you told me that, so I just want to throw that out.
No, you can promote, no, I ain't No, you can promote what you promoting, but we just don't promote, like,
Pause, right?
no, I'm just saying, like, you know, certain brands of potato chips, sodas, waters, anything, but you can promote what you promoting.
Thank you.
That's, I ain't want you to get it confused.
But every guest can promote themselves.
Now, you can promote what you ever promote.
That's the whole, what he's saying is everybody can promote
Yeah, I just told you about the
Y'all
water.
just taking a shot at it. I thought
I really was taking a shot at you. I'm gonna take a shot at
I was
you,
just saying
right?
about the water.
I want to take a shot at you, right? But it's a clean shot, though. So when I use incarcerate, you listen to a lot of Tupac, huh?
Yes.
Because I hear you got a lot of Tupac, you got a lot of messages for Tupac.
Yeah. I think that, believe it or not, that Tupac was an individual that spoke to the conditions of the social ills for our modern time. I think that his message resonated across racial lines when we start thinking about poverty, when we start thinking about growing up without fathers, when we start thinking about all these challenges that we face as individuals. And also, you know, particularly in hip hop in and of itself, hip hop has always been that voice of our communities. A lot of the work that I do, people say that we're the voice of the voiceless. But I don't believe that. We're not the voice of the voiceless. We become voices of people who've just simply been ignored. They're not voiceless because we've cried, our mothers have cried, our children have cried, and somehow the validation of who we are, our existence, and our conditions sometimes aren't heard until somebody comes along and says, oh, I think that's just so bad that what's happening to those poor black people in that community. But the whole time we've been saying the same exact thing all these years. So that's one of the things that, particularly in his music, that I really identify with, because again, I came up through that era and I knew what it was to feel like, you know, F the world and me against the world, and we feel ourselves as a community isolated from the mainstream benefits of this American society when we talk about that in that context. So that's just one of my areas.
Great. Cool. So can you let the people know where they can find you?
Yes, I can be found at educatedontincarcerate.com, also on Facebook at Terrance Coffee. Just look me up. I do a lot of stuff that I throw out there. I'm also on Twitter as well as Instagram.
So definitely follow his brother here. He dropped a lot of knowledge. Everything good. You know what I'm saying? It's basically a road you could get to. It's never too late. You know, he started at a later age to get where he at now. So, you know, just never give up. You know, that's his story. Can you let me know what podcast you on?
Say that again?
Can you let the people know what podcast you on?
Which, oh yeah, I'm on the beat 139, you know, this is where it's popular. And I want to give a quick shout out, if that's okay. Upcoming events I want to share with you. If you're here and you listen to the Beat 139 and you want to get involved in what's going on in our communities, we have some events that'll be coming up. One's the first thing, we're going to be hosting a campaign for youth justice with a screening of When They See Us at Bronx Community College, October 31st. Please reach out to me if you want to get involved with that. Also in June 2020, we'll be hosting a criminal justice conference, the Voices of Credible Messengers, on which this conference will be focused on some of the issues related to criminal justice reform from those individuals who have transcended the prison walls and are now committed to this work. And lastly, I recently did a presidential debate party with the National Action Network. And on, I think that's going to be Friday, this Friday, October 5th, the National Action Network will be hosting
October 4th is Friday.
4th?
October 4th is
Saturday.
Friday.
Well, the 5th.
Yeah,
That
fourth
is
Friday.
Friday. Okay, well, it'll be the 5th. Thank you for that.
Yes, okay.
They'll be hosting a the Bronx Christian Charismatic Prayer Fellowship for the idea of marijuana legalization. So that conversation has become very imperative and important in the Black community. When we start thinking about who's going to be expunged, and that's fine, but if they're not giving access to our communities and the cannabis industry, then again, you know, you can expunge, but if we're still dealing with the structural issues where individuals who are coming out can't get jobs and we can't get access to school or education or the mainstream, I think that's problematic, and I've heard a lot of talk
Absolutely.
about that, so I just want to throw
It's
that out there.
definitely a good issue to discuss.
All right, Terrance
Yeah,
L,
thank
ladies
you,
and gentlemen.
Professor.